They want us to think that we're an insignificant speck of dust, but let me tell you, we are so much more than dust in the wind.
At least 4 billion useless eaters will be eliminated by the year 2050.
I'm still waiting for somebody to show me gas pressure without a container.
I personally don't believe anything they say, right down to the God they claim they worship.
None of the math adds up.
You could stack up all their math books, all their science books, and even put all their degrees stacked up on top of that, and you still wouldn't be high enough to see the curvature.
This is exactly why grounding is so important.
We see too far.
We're just regular people who know we're being lied to. We're tired of it.
The bottom line is, there's only one choice left, and that's to dismantle this whole thing from the top down.
Yeah, so I'm Ashton Forbes, and I call myself the lead investigator. I don't really like fancy titles or anything like that. Into MH370X. It's a hashtag, and I guess you can call it an organization that I started. I looked at the independent group and what they did, and I said, well, we're kind of like that. We're just a group of people that are ragtag that want to get to the bottom of these MH370 videos that reemerged on social media, that got censored off of social media, that felt like there was more to it. And the people that were around back when the plane disappeared knows that there was a ton of obfuscation around what happened to this plane. It was very unclear where the plane supposedly crashed, went down, or even what happened to it, right? They were searching in the South China Sea for like 5 days. Yeah. And then they come out and admit, oh, nope, we have this radar data that shows it going back across the country. And everyone's going, wait, what? Then why are we searching over here, right? So we wanted to dig into all the past history around it. I've had some investigators are just incredible how good they are. They've been digging into like Wayback Machine, finding these articles from 2014 that like don't even exist on the internet except for on the Wayback Machine anymore. We found so much stuff related to this plane that I would never, ever have thought we would have found as much evidence out there. And we've pieced together this story that I think is by far more evidence than any other theory has been pushed out there by experts and investigators and whatever. And it presents, I think, one of the most incredible stories in human history, honestly, when you really dig into it, because there's an aspect of conspiracy related to it. And then there's a whole nother aspect of, I guess I'd call it UFOlogy, but I really think it's more of like advanced technology that's been kept suppressed or hidden from the public, and so that leads to this amalgam of this incredible story, not to mention my own journey. And I don't just mean personally, but my journey through like social media, these communities, the debunkers that are out there, and then the personal and vile attacks that have like been levied on me as well.
I was just gonna say,
like,
out of everything, I'm the most excited to talk to somebody who's probably hated more than we are, because we get a lot of hate thrown our way. But so it's awesome, because I don't know why, but no one wants you to talk. That tells me something right there.
Yeah.
A lot of people say that, right? They say like, you get so much negative attention. It makes me wonder how much of it's organic. And we've pretty much proven early on that there was very organized attacks that were happening. There was even one space that got recorded by somebody where a group of people in this UFO community were literally talking about separating me from my own investigation, saying that we have to take the investigation back from him, and that he's going on these big podcasts. And I'm sitting there like, who the hell talks like this? Who does this?
Wow.
And I had podcasters, like almost every podcaster, especially from like the early on to even recently, all get contacted by people telling them not to have me on. One person was claiming that I stole their work or something. I'm just going like, stole whose work? What are you talking about? Like a lot of this stuff, it's, I expected a pretty harsh reaction just because from the outside looking in, I've been basically a completely different person than I was before I started this investigation. I trusted the media to do their job before this. I thought that if I brought this information forward, they would pick up on it and move forward with it. I had looked at people like Bob Lazar in the UFO community and kind of how he kind of got dismissed and attacked and discredited. And I thought, well, I might be a pretty good person to do this because I have this security clearance related to my normal job that I do that's not tied to any of this stuff. So it'd be really hard for people to claim I'm crazy or whatever, because when you have a security clearance, that you have a huge background check that they do. But people still tried 100%.
A quick
and
question
then
on
also
that.
like,
have you gotten any blowback about your security clearance for talking about this at all?
Not yet, but they have to be renewed every few years, and I am a little bit worried that there might be like, I mean, if they do something, it's kind of a red flag, right?
True.
Like they would
Maybe
have to find
even better, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, from the work perspective, like only a few people at my work have even noticed a lot of this, which is kind of surprising because I've done so many podcasts and some really big ones. But every once in a while, I get like an email or a message on the work communication thing where they're like, "Hey, are you the Ashton Forbes?" It's like going on this podcast. Are you the Ashton Forbes that like I met like back when we first started working together? I'm like, oh yeah, you got me, Or I even had one of my I used to play Pokemon Go when I was living in California a few years back, and one of those guys messaged me and was like, "Dude, did I see you on Tim Pool?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, you got me. You caught me there."
That's me.
So it is kind of fun, but it's been mostly like, positive reactions on that front, So yeah, it's been a fun journey, honestly. Like I've met people and made connections with people that I would never have made the rest of my life. And it's funny because people look at my followers and stuff, and I think they think that I'm this larger than life person with 79,000 followers, but I think of myself as just a 30 follower account still that I was 6 months ago, right? And that's why I'm like in spaces with people, replying to people, not caring about what my brand or my image is. This stuff just doesn't really matter to me in general. All I've ever been trying to do is figure out what the hell the truth is about this plane that disappeared. And if there is technology out there, I realized early on, I want to try to learn how it works because it just seems awesome.
Yeah, right.
So for anybody who's listening who doesn't know, I guess the smartest thing to do, if anybody didn't know, can you tell us what the official narrative is about this first?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people don't realize the official narrative and story out there from the actual officials is that the plane just disappeared and they don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Right. We even found old articles, because the narrative that most people know is this pilot suicide narrative. That's not the official story.
I was going to say that's the one I remember. Yeah.
In fact, everybody has stood up for him. The officials have come out, the people who have done the investigation said that there's no strong evidence whatsoever that this guy, they did his mental health checks pass. His wife stands up for him. All the officials stood up for him. The investigators stood up for him. His coworkers stood up for him. Actually, they even listed the pilot suicide thing as one of the conspiracy theories on some of the old articles that we found as well, because it requires a conspiracy that like all these people are covering up for this guy being suicidal, where they have some secret evidence that he suicided the plane, but there just isn't any evidence of that.
Yeah.
The reason why people have come up with that is because they can't logically rationalize what else happened to the plane.
It's a big thing. And people have a hard time wrapping their brain around something that they can't explain. So they grasp to the first explanation that they can't immediately dismiss. That must be it. So
that's what's weird, is that a lot of the people that just try to flat out dismiss the huge amount of evidence that we have no problem going, "Oh yeah, they were just covering up for a suicidal pilot because they're trying to save face or something." Like,
because they do that all the time.
They don't give a crap about saving face.
Yeah.
That's not a thing. And when you look at a suicidal pilot scenario, it just makes no sense whatsoever. Like, if you are a suicidal pilot, when the plane goes dark, that's because you just crashed the plane, right? Like you're the first thing you're doing is you're crashing it. And people even reference like the German wings 2015, because they make this story that, oh, well, the pilot locked the co-pilot out and then he took it on an 8-hour joyride. But if you look at the German wing situation with that pilot, he crashed the plane another 10 minutes after he locked the co-pilot out.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a situation where you're going on a joyride and trying to asphyxiate all the passengers, right?
Right.
Like, it would be a situation where it's very high stress environment, right? And then you're not trying, like, they have all these narratives. Oh, he's like trying to avoid radar and all this stuff. It's like none of this is consistent with a suicidal pilot. In fact, when he turns the plane around, he goes to the nearest airport, Penang Airport, which, if you look at this Wired article, it even argues, and I've looked this up now, there's a mountain range there between Kuala Lumpur and Penang that goes north to south, and it apparently gets up to 7,000 feet. And why this is important is it's nighttime, like pitch black. So you got to be very careful flying however low you're going to fly, because there's mountains that you might crash into, right?
For sure.
And especially if the plane's been depressurized, you have to stay somewhat low so you can get enough oxygen for people to be able to breathe. You start to quickly realize, like, this is not a suicidal situation here. This is like an emergency situation,
Yeah.
a maintenance situation of some degree, right? And this is why early on we were talking about the Confessionals podcast back then in October. This was very early on in the case, only a month and a half, 2 months in. And I wasn't sure if this was some type of espionage scenario where somebody's like trying to steal this plane or something related to the plane, or if this was some type of UFOlogy scenario. Because in these videos, we see these orbs circling around the plane.
Yeah.
My immediate thought is, oh, orbs. I've been seeing orbs in UFOlogy, but you look at the orbs and you go, wait, this is not flying saucers with aliens in them. This is like orbs, like a field around the orbs, like a plasma field around them. And they're circling in this perfect sinusoidal pattern, which is a wave pattern. And you're like, wait, that's too exact. Like, that's not little people flying around in the little orbs, right? This is like some kind of computer program running these things, right?
Yeah.
And
they're not a
and that was before we dug
physical
into
thing that somebody's in. That's what you mean. Like,
yeah, and there may be some physical element underneath it, but what we're looking at there is called the non-radiating barrier, which is like a bubble, essentially, right? And that's really the way I'd like people to think about it from the scientific perspective, because what we have to do to understand these videos is not come up with new laws of physics. We just have to look at the laws of physics that exist through a new lens. We have to bend them a little bit, but we're not breaking them. If you make a bubble in space-time, what happens is whatever's inside there, the mass is reduced to zero. And if that mass is reduced to zero, now you can ignore gravity. And that's what we see these orbs doing, is they're ignoring gravity. They are not getting impacted by the force of friction while they're flying at like 2,000 miles an hour to catch up to this plane. And then we see them creating their own, what we call geodesic. And I've had to learn, by the way, all this science and all these terms like over the last 6 months, which it even impresses me sometimes when I look back at the old stuff and I'm like, damn, I knew nothing back then. And now I've learned, like, I've had physicists tutoring me. I've been talking to engineers, learning it. And that's what I would say to people too, is that a lot of people go, well, I think that a lot of people have this mindset, especially in this UFO community that I've kind of de facto become part of, that they have to just defer to various experts to tell them what's possible, what's not. Turns out the reality is actually it's not as hard as people think, and you can teach yourself. You can look into a lot of these concepts yourself. Even the idea of moving as fast as the speed of light is something called the Alcubierre drive, which comes directly actually from Star Trek. It's not Star Trek teleportation. It's Star Trek warp drive, where it's like hit warp 10, right? And now they're moving faster than the speed of light. It's actually like that. And when you think about it, you go, oh, well, I've heard about Alcubierre drive and what have you. That's been out there. And that's the rub of all this science, is that all of it's actually out there. It's just a matter of no one's really looking at it. No one's shining a spotlight on it. You don't have the physics influencers talking about it, right? Everyone's waiting for someone to tell them what to think.
Yeah.
And that's been a big part of my awakening is, whoa, wait, it's actually just like Alcubierre drive. I've heard about that. I can look into that and understand the concept of making a bubble around a craft and now allowing it to go faster than the speed of light from a outside observer's perspective.
Wow.
You're saying do your own research.
Honestly, yeah. And what's funny is that the media has gone and they've turned this idea of doing your own research into this negative concept. When I was younger, you know what doing your own research was? It was called reading. Just going and reading. And I was like, don't read anything, everybody. Just wait for us to tell you what to think on CNN and all this crap, right? Like,
they've done a really good job in the school system of getting people to believe that they can't think for themselves and just to repeat, whatever they're told. And now no one knows how to think for themselves at all. They can't even do basic tasks.
And I've seen that on social media, right? Like, I grew up when social media was at its advent. I used to be posting on the website fark.com, which was like the precursor to Reddit. And then I saw Reddit happen. And those used to be places where you could figure out the truth before it was reported in the news, days before in some cases. I even remember, I don't know which election it was, 2008 maybe, where we knew that Obama had won that election just from social media because all the results were coming in on social media faster than they were being reported on TV. And then by 2016, it had become the exact opposite. Now you couldn't tell what was true till days later, And we got to a point where critical thinking doesn't get taught in schools. And it's reached such a horrible point in social media, especially Reddit, which I'm no fan of whatsoever, where it's not even about what's true anymore. It's about how you make people feel with what you say. And that's where we've gotten to this post-truth world, and that's, I think, very damaging to the fabric of society.
It is. For sure.
Were you always kind of into this abstract sort of conspiracy theory kind of thing, or was this the first thing that sucked you in hardcore because of the evidence you found?
Yeah, this is by far the first one. I was never even like a conspiracy theorist before this. I even tell people, honestly, I think my kind of my mindset started changing in 2016 when I started noticing that social media was no longer giving me the truth before I would see it, in the news and on TV. And then by 2020 is when I probably had my big awakening. For a lot of people, I think COVID was a big awakening for people. I lived in California. I had voted for Gavin Newsom. I ended up trying to recall him and running the campaign to recall against him. I broke so many people's minds collecting signatures where they were talking to me and they couldn't understand why I couldn't deal with the guy. And that was the part where like I really woke up from that perspective. But even then, I always looked at the COVID situation as more of what they call like the mass formation psychosis, where people are just freaking themselves out.
Yeah.
And then there's this feedback loop that's happening on social media where the politicians are reading social media is blowing up, going nuts. And then it keeps perpetuating itself.
Yep.
But when I got to this is the first one where I went, holy shit, this is just a straight up conspiracy.
Yeah.
Not even theory. Like, even before this, I thought like kind of coyly, like the United States government knows about what happened to this plane because we've got satellites everywhere, right? Like we saw Bin Laden's house and we're like looking and watching people walk around, right?
Oh, they got
so
some
we've got to
stuff
have
up there
satellites
for sure,
everywhere, right? Well, as part of this investigation, we found it's way more hardcore than that. Turns out they have something called SBIRS, Space-Based Infrared System. It's scanning the whole world every 10 seconds. And they've got little stairs where they can look on specific areas and get even higher quality resolution. And then we found, actually, the debunkers helped out with a lot of the evidence because they would go, well, why is the satellite video not moving really fast if I'm looking through a satellite? And we know we're not looking through a satellite because the coordinates don't update in real time. They only update when the perspective changes. And if you were looking through the satellite while it's moving, the coordinates should be moving constantly, right?
It's,
and so we know that that's what happened. And so then we start looking around how the SBIRS system works. We start asking, the AI Grok and the Chat GPT and stuff. And we find out that, no, it's a ground-based computer system. It's pulling data from all these infrared satellites, and they're creating like a Google Earth, but video playback where they can just, it doesn't even have to watch it in real time. They can go back and be like, hey, show me Ashton's house on, whatever date. And then they're doing like a replay of it. And you go, of course, that's how it works. Cause it's not 1970 anymore. Right. Like
exactly.
Everything's computer-based. And, so this is where we realize like there's a huge conspiracy at play here. There's no way that a plane can crash into the ocean without leaving a giant debris field. 777 is
for sure.
Not only that, but
that's a big plane.
I remember when that whole garbage story came out about the whole the billionaires on the submarine, and then blah blah blah. Like it came out like, yeah, we knew when it happened or whatever. It's like they know what's going on in the ocean. They always know what's going on in the ocean. Always.
That's funny how that happened because that was a huge piece of evidence as well. So not only do we know that a plane can't crash without leaving a debris field, the number of radar systems that this plane would have to fly past is like 7, 4 different countries and 3 different super advanced military bases, right? Including the Cope Tiger and Cobra Gold exercises that were happening there between Thailand and the United States.
Why is there always exercises happening when this stuff is going on? What is up with that, man? But no one's going to even question that. Sorry, I just when
you're
said
fine.
That, it just triggered like every single time there's some sort of military exercise or some sort of event going on.
That Cope Tiger one, the theme that year was search and rescue too. So they had all the right assets right in that area.
Stop it, dude.
For a literal search and rescue. The plane flies right past them. You're saying that they didn't see the plane flying right past them? No chance in hell.
They're not good searchers or rescuers then. They didn't
see it. Right. They didn't do either one of them.
And people wonder, like, where did the drone come from? Because the drones can't catch a 777. It flies like half the speed or slightly. Well, it got intercepted it, right? And this also makes it think, well, maybe this is an operation. But that could have come from the exercises. There are joint military bases in Port Blair as well as Card Nicobar, which are right near where we think these coordinates are. But real quick, the Titan sub thing was huge because that happened like a few months before this investigation. And that's when I realized too, like, everyone's going, well, they have to, like, I bet you the military knows what happened to this thing. And then all of a sudden, 5 days later, Navy comes out and says, yeah, we heard it pop right away. And we've triangulated and pinpointed the exact location. And they're sending out things to go pick it up off the ground like the next day. Wow. And you're like, everybody else is wondering like where it even sunk, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And they have no problem lying about it. They had no problem with all the cable news saying, what's the oxygen counters and how much oxygen do they have left? And they'd known that the sub popped. This is a tiny sub, by the way, guys. Like 4 people barely fit in this sub. Compared to a 777 that can fit 300 people. This is the size of a city block. So you have that's the SOSUS system we found out. You have Diego Garcia has a hydrophone, and there's a hydrophone off the west coast of Australia as well. All 3 of these systems should have heard a 777 crashing into the ocean. They should have pinpointed this location. The SOSUS system was already declassified before 2014 as well. So there's no chance that between the radars, the pings, the acoustic data, as well as the lack of the debris field, there's just no chance of crashing in the South Indian Ocean. And the only thing even holding that narrative up for every single person who thinks it went there is some Inmarsat pings, which are pings supposedly from this satellite that supposedly tell the distance from the satellite to the plane. Now, there's a couple problems with this. One is supposedly this ACAR system was turned off at 1707 UTC hours before that. And then the other part of this is that Inmarsat is highly connected to intelligence. I looked at their board. They've got admirals and generals all over their board. And
of course,
if you look at the data, it basically runs down to about 10 rows on an Excel spreadsheet. That's the difference between this plane disappearing in the Nicobar Islands, where we see it in 2 simultaneous videos, or this plane going into the South Indian Ocean. But here's one last connection that you guys will appreciate. One of those people that was on the Titan sub, this French guy, I probably can't remember his name off the top of my head. He actually went on CNN back in 2014, and he said that if there's no debris field, the plane can't have crashed there. And he was literally just saying there's no way the debris, it could have crashed in the South Indian Ocean. And then he ends up dying on the Titan sub. And
get out.
Pretty wild. He was one of the 4 people on that sub. He was the guy that been down to the Titanic more than anyone, over 30 times.
What? I'd love
wild,
to say
right?
I'm
I saw that. I'm like,
but I'm really.
Yeah, he was the first guy. So it's a wild story that we're dealing with here. And in my opinion, at the minimum, we've proven the conspiracy that even if you think the MH370 videos are fake, which I know a lot of people probably do because it's almost impossible to believe.
Yeah.
We've still proven that whatever happened in this plane is not what the stories are being told. And the sad part is it goes to show the level of propaganda. Even if you go to the Putin Tucker interview, I thought my favorite part of that interview was when he gets asked about the Nord Stream pipeline and says, why would you not, if you know the Americans did it, why not disclose that and get a propaganda victory? And he kind of laughs, chuckles. He goes, no, the United States controls all the Western media, including European media. So the American banks have a financial investment in the European media, and that they could try to battle along that axis, but that it would ultimately be very difficult or it wouldn't be cost effective to do it. And that's when you realize, wow, we have just as much propaganda as China does, as Russia does. They just blast the same message on the TV and people believe it.
It's right out of 1984.
It is.
Our propaganda machine is insane. They're changing definitions in real time.
Yes, sir.
They are. Do you have the video that you can share? If for anybody who hasn't seen it.
Oh, of course I have them.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, the 1984, the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. George Orwell from 1984. Yes. Right? I think about that a lot, actually, because that's really what this comes down to. I mean, any logical person that's looking at this plane situation, you literally have to reject your eyes and ears in order to believe these narratives that are out there, because it's just overwhelming preponderance of evidence. So let me pull it up for you guys.
While you're pulling it up,
is it too crazy
go ahead. No.
to call this a false flag all around at this point?
I don't know. I guess this is your definition, right? You can call it a false flag, a psyop, whatever you want. I think that there's some people that believe that, there's an element where some people would argue these videos were created by the government to cover something up. The problem is, like, we never found the plane, right?
Yeah.
So what we'll see here as well is that if somebody faked these videos, how did they know the coordinates to put in there like a week before the raw data was even released to the public?
Yeah.
How did they know we would never find a plane 10 years later? Right? That's pretty damn bizarre to make these videos of a plane disappearing. And then what happens if, like, end of May, all of a sudden they find the plane in the ocean where they send these subs to look around, right? Like all of a sudden this whole hoax collapses.
Right.
Or dude, what if they find the plane and it comes back and everyone's still fine and they think it's like 2014 again? Dude, did you ever see the show Manifest, or have you heard of it?
It gets brought up all the time. I never saw it. No, I have seen Lost, which is also a little bit similar, right? But a little bit different.
I was gonna say this is the final season of Lost for real.
No, but the thing about a lot of that stuff is that the people that are making those shows like look at science that's out there, right? That's on the fringe, and that's what they use when they make their shows, right? So I don't think it's not surprising that there would be some shows that are similar. I think there was also a Steven Spielberg Taken that has some orbs circling around a plane as well.
I remember that.
So there's a lot of what you would call predictive programming that's out there.
Yeah.
The interesting part about the manifest thing, though, is that time dilation is real. So when you approach the speed of light, your time slows down. Am I saying this right? Your time slows down relative to the outside perspective. So there could be a time dilation effect where they do show up in the future, and it would be based on how far the plane traveled at the speed of light. The further you travel the speed of light, the more you'll be dilated into the future. This is kind of how the universe corrects itself. So that's weird, because if you watch the movie Interstellar, you can actually see how time dilation really works in the real world, where Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway go to this planet that is near a black hole that has these huge tides that go up like 100 feet in the air. And they're only supposed to be there for a couple minutes because of the time dilation effect, but they get stuck there for like an hour or two. And then they come back and they go to the satellite or the space station that is further away, which has less gravity. And 20 or 30 years have gone by for the guy that's on the space station. And so if you were to think about the relative perspectives there, what that means is the more mass you're next to, the slower your time flows. The less mass, the faster. So if you're on the planet Earth, we're next to a lot of mass, so our time is going at a pretty equivalent rate for all of us. But if you were to go up into the sky into outer space, your time would be going slightly faster. And you can actually put clocks, and they've tested this, and they'll see variations in the clocks, which proves that time is actually this fluid symmetry that can be warped and shifted.
Interesting.
And so then if you're watching, how would that look, right? So like if you're on the space station, you're looking down at the planet, you're looking at Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway, it would look like they're moving in slow motion, right? While your time's moving faster. That's how it kind of corrects itself. And if you're Anne Hathaway and you're Matthew McConaughey and you're looking up, you're going to see it moving in super speed. The guy who's moving on the space station is going to be like sprinting around like the Flash, basically, right? And that's how the time dilation thing would work. It's pretty weird to think about, but if you want to localize thought process on it, think about how an ant or how a fly moves so fast despite being so tiny. Like, why do they move so fast? Well, they're a tiny amount of mass. You're a much bigger amount of mass. So your time's moving slower compared to their time. This is why it's hard to hit a fly with a fly swatter. If you were to increase the size of the fly, it's not going to move at warp speed or whatever. It's not going to increase its speed because of that. Same with the ants. If you increase the size of the ant, that's why they say, oh, the ants are many times more stronger or faster than us. But if you were to increase their size, they're going to slow down because their localized time is going to become slower as well. It's a pretty weird thing to think about, but it's true.
We're into weird things. So I see you have the So
this is the satellite.
Yeah, I'll play it and you can tell us all about it.
So in the original version of this, the very first one that came out was side by side, which was a 3D stereoscopic.
Yeah.
But we're not sure if it originally came in 3D stereoscopic or if it was converted to 3D stereoscopic. I like this one because it's higher quality and it's easier to see the coordinates in the bottom left. But we did find out that there are two satellites that are sister satellites, USA 229. Which were in the right location, looking down at the Nicobar Islands at 1840 UTC, which is within minutes of when we think this plane disappeared. So whether or not it's 3D stereoscopic or not, we actually have the right kind of satellites to be looking down. Now, this is weird because the first thing is we don't even know what a satellite video should look like, right? There's no basis anywhere out there. The closest it comes is the Trump picture that he leaked in 2019, where it did show kind of a similar perspective, like this this angled perspective. But the picture that he showed of this Iranian missile silo had a huge shadow on it. And you'll notice in here, we don't see any shadows anywhere. Yeah. Now, you do see these like different color differences on the clouds, but we don't really see a directional light. You're going to see light on either side of the clouds. It's hard to tell exactly where a light source might be coming from. And what we've been able to show, too, is the military has the ability to basically make nighttime look like daytime, like very similar to what we're seeing right here, where they basically even a tiny amount of actual light, they can make it look like it's just daytime out there. So we believe this is a false color IR
technology like 100 years in the future, so I think they can do anything. So
that's what I've started to come to conclude here as well. I used to think that they maybe were 10 years more advanced, and now I'm thinking more like 50 or 100 years in front of where the public is at. Right away, you can already see these trails behind the plane. Now, these aren't contrails because these clouds here are cumulus clouds, and cumulus clouds only form at very low altitudes between 1,000 and 5,000 feet. So this plane is very low. We don't know the exact altitude because from the perspective, you can't tell exactly how high above the clouds it is. And due to the angle here, it might not really be like right above this cloud from this perspective. But this plane here is also turning. This is a 777-200, consistent with Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. It's turning and descending and maxing out the capabilities of a 777-200 while in descent, which is pretty damn specific for somebody. If they were faking it, how did they get the exact correct engineering requirements? And then we see this mouse over here show up. This is a mouse. This is an overlay. The frame rate of this mouse is 24 frames per second, but the frame rate of the background is 6 frames per second. And this is perfectly consistent with a Citrix session being logged into a remote terminal, logging into a database, and doing a screen recording.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's no camera here, right? You don't see a camera. It's not someone's camera phone. They're actually recording the screen, and they're cropped the screen too. The mouse came from the top right and came out. So there's a bigger view that we're not seeing both above and to the right. And it goes off to the bottom left as well. You'll see here in a minute as well. This seems like they were intentionally showing us this. Like now right away, we're starting to see like they want us to see this. They want us to understand what we're looking at.
It's real.
This is the part where it's like no host videos doing this, right?
Where did these videos come from?
So these videos have been we found them on the Internet Archive. The earliest one is posted by somebody called Regicide Anon. The account's been deleted and like reestablished or whatever, but it has a receive date. It says in the description, received March 12th, 2014, which is 4 days after the plane goes missing. It was published May 19th, 2014, which is about 70 days after. So we don't know why, if they, either Regicide Anon was somehow in on this and making this and on this hoax, or this video was received right after the plane disappeared.
So one
thing that's really all it comes down to.
I want to say about that. 4 days to create a fake in 4 days. I don't think they could do that. I feel like they couldn't create a fake like that in 4 days.
No chance. I've been investigating this stuff. I don't care who's pretending to be a VFX expert. Humans have this way where they overestimate their skills, right? And I do it too in my job and what have you. I mean, I even have a hard time making up storyboards for the little videos that I make. Those take hours and hours. Researching stuff takes super long periods of time, right? People procrastinate. And the amount of quality going into both of these videos, they're both perfectly in sync, we'll find out. It would take a lot of money and time. Like nobody's going out and doing this, right? And this is also why nobody's come really even close to recreating these. The person, like even the Corridor crew, completely failed at making the thermal video, which we're going to look at here in a minute. Which goes to show they're a huge studio and they couldn't even come close. They couldn't even make 5 seconds of it.
Wow.
Yeah, and honestly, their recreation. I mean, I'm no fan of them, but their recreation was just dog crap. It was really terrible. It was frankly embarrassing.
Like full disclosure, I think they suck, but it was dog crap.
Oh yeah, they're honestly terrible people.
Speaking of, don't you have a bounty? Don't you have a bounty out for someone who can recreate this video?
No, it's not for recreate. I want to be clear about this too, because there's a lot of misinformation about it. The bounty we had $150,000 bounty for the hoaxer to come forward and provide the source material. Because if you're looking at these videos, right, you're not making this in one shot, right? It's not like, you just put it together and there you go. You're going to have your saved work where you were working on it, right? And maybe you added the plane in after you built the background, right? That kind of stuff. Like you need to have absolute proof. Yes, there's going to be files, right? Tons of files, And nobody was able to come forward. We had a couple people pretend and lie like trolls do and say, I made it. You should talk to me and ask me how I made it, right? And their lies fall apart right away. You can even look at their post history and find out they were clearly lying. But there's been nobody who was able to come forward. And the debunkers have no answer for that, right? This excuses range from Bitcoin billionaire, which is just absurd, to what are some of the other excuses? Oh, they wouldn't want to come out because it would make them look bad or something like that. But anybody who made these is going to get a job at any major studio for $150,000.
That's
you're coming out, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're going to be fine. You're not worried about it if you're going to get that much money. So, so nobody came out with it. The closest we got was somebody claimed to have taken the pictures, the cloud pictures you see here. They claim to have taken them on a plane on a flight to Japan. And what I will admit is that whatever this 2D image that they found, that they claim they took this picture, does have clouds that if you like reshape them and invert them, do seem to match our clouds, which is a pretty good debunk. But what you'll see here is you can see the clouds moving and evolving. Now, they're not like moving like really strongly, but you can see like little edges of them evolve and get smaller. And the very first orb that's going to come through is actually going to punch a hole through the cloud that we were able to find.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until after we already proved that this 2D picture came out. So the 2D picture thing kind of falls flat because in order to create the two different perspectives that are perfectly in sync, you would actually need a 3D modeled environment. And if you're making a 3D modeled environment, you're going to build 3D clouds. You're not going to use a 2D static picture.
Yeah.
So right away, there's a lot of doubt on this 2D picture that came out, as well as if you've seen the toxicity and stuff that's been thrown my way, the debunkers have falsified multiple debunks, like literally just falsified them. I don't know. I don't think these are like agents of the government. I just think these are people that can't accept that these videos are real and are willing to literally do anything to convince themselves and convince others, including falsifying fake evidence, which is pretty scary in my mind. And that's why technically the offer is off the table for the 150,000 because I'm actually think that people will like literally like even try to like, you know, Photoshop out the plane at this point and then develop a fake story around it. If they were going to come out, they had months and months and months to come out. We were getting hundreds of millions of views. You know, they would have come out already. But if somebody does come out later on, they should just do it out of the good of their heart because otherwise this is a pretty bizarre hoax for to allow to be perpetuated out there.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're looking closely, I don't know if you can tell from that perspective. From my perspective, you can see these clouds are evolving, and you can see especially these ones that are much lighter here. You can kind of see them shifting around as well. Each perspective is only like 5 to 8 seconds long. So it's not like we're expecting to see huge amounts of movement here. And when you look closely, especially if you pull it in like video editing software, you'll see like whole blobs just literally just disappear. And sometimes come back. So the first orb comes flying in here, right? It comes in at about 2,000 miles an hour. It punches a hole right through this cloud where my mouse is and starts to circle the plane here. And it almost like it doesn't find the plane right away. And then it starts to find where it's supposed to be and it starts to circle it in this very specific pattern. The second orb, you probably just missed it here, but it appears right where my mouse is here, goes along the water and shoots up right next to this cloud. I don't think it goes through the cloud, but right next to it, and immediately gets into a triangle formation, even though the third orb is missing. Right?
Yeah,
and then the third orb is going to come from the top left of the screen, and it's going to basically fill in the right location, like right where my mouse is right here, and it's going to close the triangle formation off. It's a perfect 120-degree triangle formation. And once they lock in, they start to spin here. And this is where we can see this pattern where they're like mapping the plane or whatever. We don't know exactly what they're doing here, but there's clearly some purpose, right? They're circling around the center of mass. And then when it gets to this cloud over here, you can see the formation change and it goes into a ring formation around the plane. And now they're spinning around the plane. And here's another detail, like right here, all of a sudden the orbs start to slow down slightly. This was something we didn't catch until like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. And the orb, they slow down a little bit. And actually it's going to coincide with the second video where the orbs realign right before they begin to converge on the plane. They're a little bit slower right there. And now right about here, they're going to start to converge. And then you're going to see our event happen about where my mouse is right here. And this plane's going to disappear.
Wow.
Gone.
Dude,
how wild is that?
That's the craziest video I've seen on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, me too, man. You can understand why I became an advocate for this. I'm looking at this, I'm going, what the hell?
Yeah.
And even if you see one video, you might be like, okay, sure, they can fake this, right? And then you see a second video from a different perspective, from a different angle, from another military asset that's exactly in sync with the first one. And you go, wait a minute, what? I've never seen two like that, right?
You don't ever see with UFO videos or whatever you want to call it. You never see two from the same or from two different perspectives that totally match ever.
And the clouds match up and just
and we've actually proven that. Like, I have another video I can show in a minute, but like near the end here, before it zaps, you can actually tell because the drone is off to the north here. They cropped the drone out, which is also another weird thing. Like, there's so many details about like why they crop this stuff out. The Citrix session, you start to build a profile for the person who would have leaked this.
People are, I mean, everybody's human. Like, maybe at first they were like, I'm gonna get the best thing I can of the plane, and then after they're like, oh crap, I should have left the drone in. Like, I should have let that happen. I mean, I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Because this was the first video that leaked, and then the drone video leaks like 2 weeks later. So it almost makes you wonder if you look at it, because you can't really see very well because I got this bar in the way here. But in the bottom left, it says NROL 22. That's the first reconnaissance launch of the SBIRS system, the space-based infrared system that I was talking about. That was the very first one. Wow. And so that might be the command satellite that they've logged into. And then there's coordinates here. And these coordinates shift only when the perspective shifts, and it points the plane at the Nicobar Islands, which is the place where the narrative says that this plane turned to the South Indian Ocean, made some like 270-degree turn into the South Indian Ocean. And I'm going, wait a minute. So now you're saying that all that needs to happen is the plane didn't go to the South Indian Ocean, and now this video is what really happened to the plane? Like, whoa. And you see here, they go to the right. They change the perspective again, even after the plane disappears. Like, why are they doing that, right? They change the perspective again, and the smoke trail's gone. Because it would be a lot easier to sell to people the idea that this plane was cloaked or something like that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be the case. Doesn't seem to be cloaking, because that smoke trail would keep going if it was cloaked, right? It could be like an annihilation event, that this plane's getting annihilated by some kind of antimatter, but
I feel like you would
that's
see
also
that,
unlikely.
Though. Like,
the zap would be like a nuclear bomb going off, even bigger, because that's a lot of mass, right?
Do you think both these videos are leaked from the same person, or do you think they're from two
different?
Yeah,
I'm almost certain. Yep, I think it's the same person for sure.
That's
and now, where did they leak them? I think they leaked them onto the internet somewhere. Maybe even directly to Regicidon. Yeah, it could be the dark web. We've also speculated like a South American forum. They might have leaked them to one of their friends and they get out
stuff for sure. So maybe that was a good.
A lot of the early posts were all in Spanish as well, right?
Oh, really?
So, and one of them even argues. One of the ones I think was the Vimeo one. I think was uploaded in August of 2014. This one, the Regicide ones were uploaded in May and June, respectively. So a couple months before that. And one of them in the description, it says that Regicidon argued with the other people as to the legitimacy of the videos, which is like, whoa. So did Regicidon have to be convinced that the videos were real? Especially the satellite one. Well, I mean, in 2014, people are going to be on, no, this ain't real, dude.
The receive date was way after, right? Or way before, sorry. The receive date. And
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So you think, and it's called satellite video, airliner, and UFOs. So it makes you wonder, like, how much information were they given? Were they told it was a satellite video? Because if you look at that, why else? A lot of people, when they first look at that satellite video, they think we're looking up as opposed to looking down.
Right.
That's how little perspective we have of what we're even looking at.
Right.
So maybe the person that leaked it, they leaked it intentionally. They cropped the information. They just wanted people to know this is MH370. This is the location, right? And they probably knew those coordinates would end up matching up to the real location of the plane. So they might have even thought that first video is enough, right? They might have thought, this is absolute proof. Here you go.
Yeah.
And then the media ignores it, and they're like, okay, well, if that's not enough for you guys, here's a literal MQ-1C Gray Eagle. You can see the nose of the plane. You can see this thermal patch. This is where the brain is of the drone. This is where the electronics are, right in here.
Yeah.
It's like a panel that flips open. And and this is from an angle from the north looking down at where the plane was. And you're going to see it from a horizontal perspective now, as opposed to from looking down at a vertical angle from the opposite side. Okay. And so here we go with this one. And this one as well. Apparently, we've dug into this. A lot of people made so many false claims about these videos. One thing that's so weird about the internet is how many people pretend to be experts when they're not. It's bizarre.
Oh,
I've had people.
We're well aware of that.
Also, apparently, everybody's apparently a VFX expert when you know that only like almost none of them are. We've had people pretend to be military experts that say that FLIR video doesn't look like this, that have never worked on these drones ever before, that they just pretend like they're experts. It's so weird how much people just lie openly about their fake credentials everywhere.
One thing I want to ask about this footage. So this came out in 2014, right? So
and so here's the other crazy story real quick is that I saw this video in 2014. Like I was casually looking around the evidence around the plane and looking into it back in 2014 because I told you guys I used to be somebody who was on Reddit and all these other social media sites.
Right.
And I had saw this one. I thought it was fake too, like anybody else would. I didn't even know what the hell I was looking at in 2014. Right. I'm looking at this and going, what is this? Right. And it wasn't until 2017 that you see. Yeah, it wasn't until 2017 you get those FLIR videos where those forward-looking infrared videos that we saw, the Tic Tac and the
that's what I was going to ask.
The Go Fast.
And
so it wasn't until then when you start to realize this is what they look like.
Did people know in 2014 in order to fake it that this is what it would look like? Because I didn't.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like almost you're going to see a lot more details in here where there's just no chance anyone could have faked this in 2014. We didn't have the basis to fake it. That's the biggest thing from the public perspective. And people go, oh, well, those FLIR videos were out there. Nobody thought those FLIR videos were real back then out there, right? There was a couple, I think one of them was leaked to the public before that. It had been conclusively debunked for like 9 years before the Navy admitted it was real and declassified in 2016. Just like these videos, right? The same people even have conclusively debunked these videos that were wrong about that video, which is kind of bizarre. And so, so this, though, is apparently, from what we've been told by real experts, not fake ones, that this is potentially the real color scheme of the camera, and then they can put them into black and white as well. It's just literally a matter of setting on these Raytheon cameras. Now, this one's underneath the wing, so this is like a special aerial surveillance loadout. And the MQ-1C Gray Eagle, you can actually find pictures on Google if you do Google image search of these drones with the cameras on the wings, the extra cameras on the wings. Because normally the main camera is just in there underneath the nose of the camera as well. This is like a specialized one, potentially specifically for this type of aerial surveillance reconnaissance. And we found out as well the MQ-1Cs, this is one of their purposes, is aerial surveillance, reconnaissance, intelligence, etc. So like, if these are fake, how does everything line up? Every single thing lines up, right? And here's the other thing too, is the camera shake. When they zoom in as well, there's a little bit of a delay because this is an operator manually controlling the camera. It's not automatically tracking the plane. The camera shake actually increases when they zoom in, just like if you were to do optical zoom on your camera, the shake is going to increase.
Know that
exactly the same.
To fake this, you would have to know that happens.
So you can see it's kind of light here. And then when we get in closer, you're going to see it's going to increase even more, right? Now it's even higher than it was before. I mean, it's all realistic. And now look at these orbs.
And
like,
that's
look at
smoke.
these trails.
That's smoke behind it, right? Smoke for sure.
Yeah. So because it can't be contrails, it could be exhaust or smoke. But as we're going to see here in a second, there's a very clear heat signature in the belly of the plane.
Okay.
You think it's getting microwaved?
Sorry, what?
You think it's getting microwaved?
No, I think that I think there's a lithium ion battery fire. And I think that's the real story. There's 500 pounds of those on this plane. There's a witness in this location that sees the plane glowing orange with no navigation lights. That's consistent with them battling a lithium ion battery fire for over an hour. And this bromine chemical gas is permeating throughout the plane.
Wow.
So what we think is happening is the air conditioning ducts, which are actually right below where we're going to see this heat signature, is spewing out the smoke. And some people, I think, falsely think that we're looking at the smoke coming from the engine here, but you have to understand a lot about thermodynamics and how like stuff flows in the air, where the smoke can be coming out of these vents and then wrapping around the plane, and therefore and then kind of spreading out. So I still strongly believe that the smoke is coming from the body and not from the engines. And we'll see that in here in a second. But what I want to point out is you can clearly see the non-radiating barrier here, where you see this green and then this blue around it, where we're not looking at like a metal ball here. These things kind of warp a little bit. We're looking at it like a plasma field. And you can see these dark trails you can begin to see kind of behind the orbs, but you also see them in front of the orbs. And that's because they actually are being created in front of the orbs and pulling the orbs forward. This is the geodesic that I was talking about. It's a little bit hard to see in this version, but you can still see it. where you can see like right here in front of the orb is the line. You can't really see it very well here, but you can see the black line right here in front of this orb. And they're following these like train tracks. So they're ignoring gravity, not falling, but they're also pulling themselves forward. This is a detail that I've never seen in any video ever in my whole life, right? Who's even coming up with this stuff? There's just, there's no basis. And real VFX experts, real ones that aren't fake VFX experts will tell you when you fake something like, or bake something, you need a reference. You need something to look at. Even when they do CGI, they have a person with a suit on, right? And then moving around, and then they convert that in order to make it look real. So where's the reference? Because there is no reference for any of this stuff.
I was going to say, where do you find a reference for this?
Yeah, and before we go further, for anybody who doesn't know, because he mentioned the lithium batteries, for anybody who doesn't know, you can even Google, YouTube, whatever. Look at what happens when one of those catch on fire. Look what happens when they're thrown in water or anything. It's ridiculous. It's crazy.
Insane. Yeah, it's insane.
500 pounds of them that were unsafely packaged.
Transporting them supposedly. Like, why is there 500 pounds?
They got banned from the. They got banned from being in the passenger of cargo planes by the FAA in 2015.
Yeah,
and that's weird because it's 1 year after this plane went missing.
I know.
Really?
And
but was it
if you go to the FAA's website right now, go ahead.
No, were they just transporting them? Was it just regular cargo? Why was there 500 pounds of batteries?
That's
on
the
this
question,
plane?
right? When I saw there was 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries, that I didn't know how dangerous they were until this investigation. They're extremely dangerous. There was 74 incidents in the domestic United States of lithium-ion battery fires, even after they outlawed them in passenger in the cargo bay. This is like in the actual area where people are.
Before you tell me anything else, I just want to put my theory out there right now. I think somebody put those batteries on there knowing it was going to mess up the plane, trying to kill somebody on the plane, and the reason that this happened is because the government was trying to save someone on that plane. I know I sound crazy. I'm just putting that out there before you go any further.
That's very similar to my theory, and there's a video you guys should watch. I don't know if we'll have time for it today, but if you Google Diego Garcia whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes, you will find a YouTube video that somebody made. I don't know who. Back in January, like 8th or 9th or something like that, all of a sudden shows up on a brand new YouTube channel, has a perfect AI voice, and sends like a whole letter, 11 minutes long,
to you,
presents to me, directly to me. I'm sitting there going, "What's like this is the weirdest shit that ever happened my whole life." Like really, like in the middle of a movie. And I don't blame people for thinking like Ashton must have made this, but I'd have to be a complete psychopath in order.
I was gonna.
I don't get that vibe from you. I'm just being honest. And can we just say
I don't have those kind of skills either.
Diego
I'm sitting here
Garcia,
listening to this AI voice, and I'm going, what?
Diego Garcia has a lot of weird stuff around it. A lot of weird stuff.
And that's where I would bet this plane ends up going. Like, I don't know if it directly goes there or what. We can't tell. We don't have two more videos on the other side, wherever this plane is going. But that's where I would guess the plane went. There's some circumstantial evidence. But let's finish this video out, then we can talk more about the fire scenario, Diego Garcia, whatever else you guys want. So again, we see this is perfectly aligned with the other one. We can see the shake increasing here. We can see the smoke. One of the debunks is supposedly there's jittery smoke trails, but you can tell that's just from the shake of the camera. And they try to prove it by stabilizing the footage, but you can't do that. The stabilization of the footage and other types of effects that people do actually add frames that aren't in there. And that's how you get some of these fake debunks. This is more of the falsified debunks. I had somebody as well, like, do some kind of slow-mo effect to it and then claim that the reticles here were warping and they aren't in the real videos. And this is the problem with like when people get too invested in trying to prove the videos wrong, they end up making fake debunks. Another one is people argue there's two frames that are the same that aren't actually the same. Like we can use there's some kind of I don't know if it's like a layover that you can do and you can show the differences. And you can see that they're not the same frame because the picture would be white if they were, and you can see the plane and all this background stuff. So it's just kind of sad that there's a lot of people out there that are so willing to convince themselves that they'll just fake stuff. But end of the day, I leave it up to the audience to decide what's real and what's not.
That's us too. You decide.
That's the point, right?
Yep.
And if this is fake, why is the plane going off the screen here when they're zooming in? Because what you're going to see here is when the plane comes back, they've zoomed in even more now.
No one would
the shake
do that.
is even higher
no
than
one
it was before.
would take it off the screen.
And now look at how the shake, how strong the shake is, right? And now we can start to see there's a heat signature in the orbs. When the orbs pass through the trail here too, they get distorted just like you would expect as they're going through smoke. And this is the part too where you can see the smoke is not aligned with the engine. It's a little bit above here because what it looks like is coming through the body of the plane and then wrapping around the side of the plane.
What's that
right?
heat signature in the belly of the plane? What's that?
Yeah, so this is where we think the hot smoke is billowing out of. There's 2 air conditioning exhaust ports for heat exhaust right here. And some people say, oh, it's the AC packets. Well, the temperature is the same as the engine, right? Like,
it's pretty hot.
I did AC for like 15 years. I can tell you it's not putting off enough heat that it's going to match a Boeing engine. So definitely.
And so we looked, and we're looking at from like an angle from behind. So this is like right where the landing gear is, and right where the landing gear is, there's 2 heat exhaust ports, one on either side as well. So what we think is that there's a cargo bay in here. There's a lithium-ion battery fire happening inside. The fire extinguishing devices spew halon 1301, which has bromine in it. It's a chemical reaction that occurs where it absorbs the oxygen. So you need to depressurize the plane because the oxygen is being sucked out of the plane. So everyone's going to asphyxiate if you don't. And so you also have to fly low. Yes. And so what do we see in the videos? We see the plane flying low. And there's other witnesses that saw the plane flying low right after it went dark as well, all consistent with a fire scenario, right? And the thing about those lithium-ion batteries you just pointed out, they don't go out, or they go out and then they come back up again 30 seconds later. And so it becomes a situation where you're perpetually trying to put them out. It would have been a desperate scenario. And the halon gas can last for up to 3 to 4 hours. So people argue, some of these experts say, well, if the plane was on fire, it's going to burn up in 15 minutes. Those people are liars. They don't know. That's the reality. We looked into it. We found experts. Dr. Edel, you can find a Daily Beast article about a literal expert in lithium-ion battery fires, says it could last for 3 hours, especially if it's in one of these cargo bays that's built to maintain a fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, we've all seen the videos of like the Teslas exploding, instant combustion, and they can't.
And that's just one small battery.
Burning underwater. I've seen Teslas burning underwater. Someone drove it in a canal, water hit it, it caught on fire underwater. So we know what they can do.
So check out these monopoles here, right? So this is supposedly like a magnetic monopole or a topological monopole. I had a guy named Bob Grenier. If you look him up, he does low energy nuclear reactions, and he does like experimental reactions. And what he's been seeing and testing on the small scales is actually consistent with what we're seeing here on a large scale. And that's what, talking to him, he made a video. I didn't even reach out to him. He made a video about my work and these videos. And he's going, this is like proving his science and proving the stuff he's saying, but on a larger scale. And so the way I think about these orbs here is you think about like a magnet, like a north magnet, and you were to take another north magnet. And if you were to try to like jam them together, they're going to like try to, spread apart. So it's possible these orbs are like getting locked into a formation, and that's how they're doing their triangle pattern. And what you're going to see here in a second is them getting jammed together at a super high speed, where it creates a super strong magnetic repulsion effect, so strong that it can rip through the fabric of space-time. That's the best explanation I can give you here. We call it macroscopic phase conjugation. Wow. So you can see here the monopoles, and now you're going to see them reorient here in a second. Right now it's very quick, and then poof, the plane's just gone, not there. You can even still see the black line in front of the one orb that was there, and the plane's just totally gone. Now, this is also in the original video. Then it goes into this slow-mo where you can see other stuff, and you see the drone operator like slightly moving around, but they're not freaking out. Like if I'm a drone operator and I'm seeing this and I'm operating the camera, I'm
you're all over the place.
Out.
Right. Yeah. Like where is it? Where is it?
What did I just see? That's what leads me to believe this was an operation. They knew exactly what was happening. They're filming because they're collecting intelligence. They want to watch how it plays out. Look at and this is also in the original footage. Then it goes into this weird super zoomed in where they want to show you the orbs. They want you to be like, look at these orbs, look at the heat signature, right? Look at what's happening here. And then it goes into a slow-mo, 2 slow-mos of the zap. So here's the first slow-mo. Now watch, I'll just point out when it orients. Reorienting right now. You can see the heat signature kind of change there. Yeah. It reorients right there. That's the same as when it slows down in the satellite video. Who is putting that detail into their video? Yeah. It's clearly reorienting, because right there it reorients, and now it starts to converge right after this. So it just reoriented, and now they're converging, and it's like they're re-angling to point directly at the center of the plane. And then like that magnetic effect creates some type of amplification where it's called breaking the Schwinger limit, which is essentially super high energy density that breaks the free permivivity. I can't say the right word of free space though, of like whatever the energy density is of free space. And that last frame right there, you can actually see right here. Look at this blur.
Now,
right? The
just
orbs are flattened.
If you were hoaxing this, you would have that plain center frame. Center frame.
Yes, that's
no way.
And if you look at a lot of hoax videos, you see that, right, where it's center frame. And that's why when like people like the Corridor crew are saying this looks fake, this makes me question everything they ever did, because there's no way if you're making a bunch of fake videos that you don't look at this and go, holy shit, that's real. Like a lot of the VFX that's where I've been talking to go, no, this is like, yes, you can fake anything, but this is like a lot of weird stuff, a lot of small details, and a lot of work for this. Anyone who says this is easy to fake, they're a straight up liar.
Yeah.
I'm just going to point that. This is not easy to fake.
And if you go back and watch that other video, everything lines up perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. They all line up perfectly. If you use side by sides, we've got the side by side version, and you can see the orbs in the same spot in both videos. They're both exactly lined up. Now, the other part about this too is this is very important from a scientific perspective. We see gravitational lensing here. Like they're building a field here around the plane that you don't see because you don't see a magnetic field with your eyes, right?
Yeah.
But there's a very powerful magnetic field happening, and this blur is consistent with the plane beginning to accelerate, as well as it's a little bit smaller than it was in the previous frame, which may be indicative of some type of mass reduction beginning, because in order to move at the speed of light, you need to have your mass get reduced to zero, at least from a local perspective. And then instantly after that, and actually in the next frame, you can still see the tail of the plane sticking out right here.
Oh, yeah.
Until the next frame, where now it's just all encompassed, right? And when we saw this happen in real time, it was like the blink of an eye, right?
Right.
This is super, super slow-mo. Like you're looking at literally 1/20, like one fraction of a second in the terms of the frames here.
Just so
and then it's just
so people can see it, can you play one video and then the other video just at regular speed, just so we can see it?
You want to just do side by side?
Oh yeah, that's even better.
Oh yeah, there you go. So here's the side by side, and you can see in the bottom left of the satellite video, you can see the coordinates when it's not covered by the clouds as well. In this version, they're a little too small to make out the coordinates, but you can take my word for it that we were able to prove that that's the Nicobar Islands for those coordinates. And we know the plane's actually traveling generally south and to the east based on the coordinate shifts.
The second they pop up on one, they pop up on the other.
Dude, there's no way this is fake.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, there's just too many small details that nobody would have any reference to create.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what makes it wild. I mean, there are, in my mind, the only one who could fake this would be like a military covert, like intelligence.
But even that, wouldn't they have to fake it?
And it would take some time. They would have had to have already built the video before the plane disappeared.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is possible, but why?
You know what? I've got 2 points to make here. The first one is whenever we see anything about portals, like opening up, it always has something to do about the speeds and a circular motion. And on top of that, every UFO video that I've ever seen also has something to do with like something spiraling or circling. And I've been looking into Mercury a lot lately and free energy. And the thing that you find out with Mercury is that when you spiral it like that, it turns into a very high powered conductor. And this is provable.
Yep.
And so I don't know if these crafts use some sort of technology like that, but that's what I'm starting to think a little bit.
Well, you're a smart person, because what I had very early assumed was that this would require some level of superconductivity. And I had figured that from the LK99 thing that got popularized but also suppressed over last summer.
Yeah.
And now it's starting to come back again. And I had argued that this was like superconductive harmonic orbs. Next thing I know, I've got physicists and engineers reaching out to me. I email Salvatore Pius. He emails me back within a few hours and says, set up a podcast so that we can do an interview. Right. And this is a guy that has patents for high frequency gravitational wave generator, inertial mass reduction device for a transmedium craft. And you start to think about that, you're like, wait a minute, you're talking about a UFO here, right? You're talking about what we're seeing in these videos. And he's now become a good friend of mine. And I strongly, strongly believe that he knows this is real. I don't know if he knew about MH370, but he knows the technology is. And he's not the only one I've reached out to or that have basically confirmed that what we're seeing here is, yes, some form of superconductivity. The letter I just mentioned to you adds so many elements that I hadn't even thought of. Where like I was trying to figure out is superconductivity. If you go to Listen to My Hard Truths podcast, I mentioned this a lot. Where I ask, like, is superconductivity what allows this to happen, or is there something that allows the superconductivity to happen? Like, what's the relationship? Yeah. And the letter mentions that the rudimentary form of this technology leads to superconductivity, which is what enables teleportation or whatever. Because Roy D. Herbert would say that this is creating a coherent matter wave, like around the plane, pulling the electrons from the atoms around the plane, and then creating one coherent wave of matter, which is now allowing the plane to basically revert to a wave function, where now the plane can be in a probabilistic location as opposed to a deterministic location, just like the double slit experiment. That was something else early on. I was talking about the double slit experiment, where we watch the wave function break down when we look and see which slit, the atoms are going through. So yeah, all of this it seems impossible, but really what it requires is a unification theory of quantum field theory and general relativity, which is the very large stuff and the very small stuff. Yeah. Roy D. Herbert, the physicist, would argue it's the properties denote the behavior, irregardless of size. Meaning if you can get even a plane to act like an atom, it will obtain the properties of an atom. And now you can achieve light speeds. So in this video, though, I want to show you that the clouds match, because you can tell the drone's probably somewhere up where my mouse is up here, probably a little further back. And you're going to see this cloud right here that we're looking at, I think is the cloud in the background from the angle here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're seeing this cloud here, and then you're going to see this second cloud here in a second. And now you see the second cloud right here. So you can tell the drone somewhere where my mouse is, and we saw the first cloud here, and then we see the second cloud here. So to me, this is like, okay, this proves that it would require a 3D rendered environment where you build 3D volumetric clouds so you can get the clouds matching for both angles. One more thing I want to show is the satellite. So this is the satellite, USA 229. You can see the time in the top here, 1830, 1834 UTC. This bubble is actually only about 1,000 kilometers. After we looked at and found out about the Sibber system, we think this scan could be like 4,000 or 5,000 kilometers wide. So they can look huge, huge areas. And even though the coordinates shift, it doesn't mean the coordinates are staring at the plane. In fact, we know the coordinates in the video are not at the plane, because there's not 3 dimensions to the coordinates. It's only 2 axes, which means it's looking at some point on the ground. Otherwise, if it was looking at some point in the air, there would be a 3rd axis for a Z axis. So we only have an X and Y here. Now, right about now is like, we think this is about when the planes disappeared in 1839, 1840, but we could be off by a few minutes.
Yeah.
But again, if the Sibber system is just a ground-based computer system, then you don't even need the satellites to be in a specific angle, because it could be actually pulling data from multiple satellites at the same time to create the whole 3D rendered video that you see, right? And it's just using data from multiple satellites simultaneously. But still pretty cool that we actually literally have a satellite staring down at the Nicobar Islands at the exact time where this plane supposedly turns into the South Indian Ocean here. So we know 100% the government knows what happens. We even had, I think it was the Day 5 press conference, the Malaysian Minister of Defense gets asked, are U.S. spy satellites over the regions? Are we in touch with them? And he responds, yes, we're in touch with them. Yes. Yeah. Wow. It's like, okay, well, here they are. Right. So where the hell's the plane?
Yeah. And so even if this isn't what really happened, which I do believe it is, they still know what happened to these.
They 100% know.
Planes.
Like, and so here's the last one. I want to show the Sibber system, because looking at the Sibber system, this is when my mind was just like, okay, they know. It's saying global persistent infrared surveillance. That's how the video starts. And look at this. Are you kidding me? These are geostationary satellites, 40,000 kilometers away. There's 6 of them here. They're in a constellation scanning the whole globe every 10 seconds. These are your oblong satellites, like your NRL-22, that are your relay satellites that are relaying between the other satellites and beaming information back to the ground-based computer. And then not even pictured here, the low Earth orbit satellites like USA 229. Just like 2 weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal did a whole video about the Sibber system, where a guy at the end even says they're integrating the mid and low Earth orbit satellites to Sibbers, which if they're saying that they're doing it now, they probably did it 10 years ago, right? It's not, there's no, there's no way that a random person is ahead of the game in terms of the military intelligence. Yeah. So you can see them, look at these scans, man. And you can see there's actually more than one scan because one of them's the stare and one of them's the large wide range thing. Now, these are like Hubble Space Telescopes that are staring down at the Earth, right? Just to give you some perspective of how powerful these things are. Maybe even more powerful. We don't even know their exact capabilities. Here are your relay satellites, the oblongs. And then if we zoom forward, here's the part where they talk about the stare and the scanner. So one's scanning and one can stare. You know, I mean, you can just tell based on the name what's going on with those, right? And then it shows you once again, like, here we go. Look at this. Look at how wide these scans are. Even the stare scans thousands of kilometers, right? And the big one is like they're scanning the whole Earth all the time.
Wow.
And so
yeah, man. I have no doubt that no matter what you believe these things are, that they can see probably 100%. Every inch of what the Earth is at all times.
At all times, 100%. And this doesn't even show all the satellites. It's not even showing the low Earth orbit ones. There's dozens. So yeah, they got every inch of the Earth scanned, 100%. This is where Kim.com got invested. Now watch this. We never forget who we're working for, Lockheed Martin. That's their real slogan.
What the hell is that even supposed to mean?
We never forget
exactly what it says.
Look at the year, 2011. 2011. This is 3 years before the plane goes missing. The Cyber system constellation becomes fully online 2013. Wow. I mean, dude, we never forget who we're working for. Come on, guys. This is. I tell people this is like Hail Hydra, dude. This is some straight up dark stuff. So yeah, you know, we've got this. So real quick, the fire scenario. We figured this out kind of in reverse, where we found the satellite. We figured out the northern location based on the coordinates was correct. Then I find Catherine T, who was there on a boat. She has a sighting that goes back to like day after, where she gets on land and she reports her sighting. She does a blog post. She talks to all the experts. She does follow-up blog posts. She still believes she saw the plane in 2022, 8 years later, on her last tweet. And she asked this, why have the families gone silent? The silence is sinister. That's her last tweet.
Wow.
And so, I mean, she saw the plane.
Is she okay?
She sees the plane glowing orange.
Does anybody
I was
know?
worried, but I talked to her. Did a follow-up interview. She corroborated all her old evidence. So, you know, if she was lying, boy, that was a long con that she's pulling.
Yeah.
She saw the plane glowing orange.
Payoff.
She saw it. Yeah, for no payoff.
Yeah.
She saw it low like we see in the videos. She saw it descending. She saw it from the same direction that the plane would have been coming from, and circling in the same direction that we see it circling, doing a counterclockwise spin. Now she sees it glowing orange, and I'm going, well, why is it glowing orange? It's like, is the orbs causing it to glow orange or something else? And that's when somebody mentions the bromine in the halon 1301, and we look it up, and bromine's a halogen gas, and there's a chemical reaction image that you can see where it shows that bromine can be released. I don't know if it's pouring water on it or whatever's required. You're actually supposed to pour water on the batteries for lithium-ion batteries. So somehow bromine's getting released, and the plane's permeating this orange bromine gas, and that's why she's seeing this hazy glowing orange plane, because she's seeing the glowing orange of the bromine. And I go, holy shit, it's a fire. And of course it's a fire. 500 pounds of dangerous lithium-ion batteries. We look into the lithium-ion batteries in the ATSB, the official report, and you can see these things are not packaged safely. Like, they just straight up admit it in the report. Like, they're just clamping them together. They look like IEDs. They put them just in like cardboard boxes stacked on top of each other side by side. And they missed 2 security screenings. They were physically inspected, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But
there they are.
And I talked to experts. Yeah. It's like, and so the Malaysian Airlines CEO lies about the fact he says there's no dangerous cargo. And then on March 20th, a week after, they come up with the South Indian Ocean narrative. He says, oh yeah, just kidding. There was 487 pounds of lithium ion batteries on board the plane. And then a year later, it turns out we find out they weren't screened twice. And you're going, okay, well, obviously you lied about this, because if you didn't lie about this, everyone's going to immediately assume that's what the scenario was, right? And in retrospect, it seems obvious, because then I go look at the other witnesses. I had thought all the witnesses, they hadn't seen the plane. Once I find out about KT, I'm like, okay, wait, let me go back to those other witnesses again. Turns out Mike McKay is on an oil rig. He sees the plane on fire the same moment it goes dark for about 5 seconds, which is consistent with the automatic fire extinguishing devices going out and putting the fire out right away. And he sees it flying low, and he gets discredited because people say, oh, he's too far away. He's 300 miles away or 290 miles away, whatever it is. But the plane's at 35,000 feet. It's very high in the air, and he's seen it probably low on the horizon because it's so far away, but it's actually in the air, right? He might even be seeing the reflection. Turns out it was perfect visual conditions that night. They had just rained, which I used to live in Singapore, and there's normally a lot of haze, but once the rain pushes it all away, you can see very clearly. And I've had other podcasters adamantly argue you couldn't see it. The independent group adamantly argue that he couldn't see it. And then all I do is I go show them the picture of Chicago from the opposite side of Lake Michigan, where supposedly it's impossible to see it from that far.
Yep.
And I just say, well, there you are. You're wrong, right?
You can
because there's literally a picture out there of Chicago from 60 miles away, low to the ground, where you're not supposed to be able to see it, and you can just literally see it. So I'm not saying this flat Earth. I'm just saying that the math out there is not like some conclusive thing, right? Like he saw the plane, he didn't make up this whole sighting, right? And there's more. There's 9 witnesses along the coast that hear a loud noise at the exact same time the plane goes dark, the same time Mike McKay sees it. The batteries exploded, right?
Yeah.
And then 10 minutes later, I mean, it's basically a bomb, but it's not going to blow up the whole plane, right? Like you can see those lithium-ion battery fires, they explode, right? But they don't blow up like a house, right? They blow up, they start smoking everywhere, fire. And then it gets put out and the smoke's probably going everywhere and then it's coming back up. And then you can imagine the crew jumping down there and starting to try to put it out, right? And trying to keep it out. And then 10 minutes later, the plane is flying very low. Turns out there's 8 fishermen on a boat just in the South China Sea, 10 miles off the coast between Thailand and Malaysia. 8 of them, they see the plane flying unusually low. Wow. Well, when I was on Tim Pool, I mentioned this, and all of a sudden people in the replies in the chat started mentioning, I'm a pilot, and this is exactly what you would do in a fire scenario. You would depressurize the plane because you got to get the smoke out, and you got to get enough oxygen in there because you have the fire extinguishing gas pulling oxygen out of the plane. And that's exactly what you would do via protocol. You got to get low, right? And so why are they going to Penang? Because Penang's the closest airport that you can land safely. And it's got better terrain because you've got these 7,000-foot mountains that are between Kuala Lumpur and Penang. So it's middle of the night. You don't want to crash into a mountain while you're flying low. So you're going to the closest airport, which is Penang Airport. Now, we don't know why they don't land. Maybe the airport, the landing gear lights are not turned on, or the runway lights are not turned on. Maybe the fire damaged the landing gear.
Yeah.
Maybe they couldn't dump the fuel because of the fire scenario. We don't really know. But for whatever reason, it seems like they went for a water landing. Maybe they were going to the Cope Tiger exercise and the Cobra Gold exercise because they knew there were assets there that could help them, right? And maybe they actually had communication, and that all just got classified, and that's why the public didn't know about it.
Maybe they were a part of the operation, didn't know it.
There could be that too. I mean, there's 2 Iranian passengers. So from the espionage perspective, there's these 2 Iranian passengers that were on fake passports, stolen passports, that changed their appearance to look like the people in the passports. And they were also 2 of the only white people on the entire plane. This plane is filled with Asian people, and there's probably like a handful of white people, and 2 of them are on fake passports, and that's not suspicious to people.
I know, yeah.
Like they say, oh, well, these people were refugees. They were trying to get to Amsterdam, and I'm going, wait, well, you can just fly directly from Kuala Lumpur to Amsterdam. You don't go to Beijing to go to Amsterdam on a fake passport. Like just common sense, right? And so now, like you were saying, I'm thinking the espionage scenario makes more sense. Like the batteries were put on there by the government. I think our government, United States. They diverted the plane with the batteries. They knew the batteries wouldn't take the plane down, but they would cause it to divert. And then they orbed the plane, wherever the hell they orbed it to, right? Yeah. If you listen to the letter to me, the letter argues that we did this because there were defectors, the Freescale semiconductor scientists. There's 20 of them on the plane, which is way too many. Yeah, we found out they're all sitting next to each other. Some of them even have their family with them. Like, why do they have their family with them if they're going to a 1-week training course or 1 week in China to improve the plants there? Like that, why you bring your whole family and your kids with?
Sounds like they're trying to get away from something.
Yeah, right. And the company should have, if they booked this, if they're sitting together, you presume that the company and the travel agency booked them together. And if that's so, they should have had red flags going, this is too many people for one plane, right? Like my company, I think it's like 2 to 3 people. And then the company says, no, this is too many because if the plane goes down, we don't want to lose all this intellectual property, right? But you've got all these people on there. The letter to me argues that it was espionage, that the government, United States government knew about it back in December before March, and that they let China let this play out. That these people, the 8 Chinese ones apparently were planned defecting. China had information about them or something. And again, this is just from this letter.
Yeah.
And that the United States set the batteries up, they diverted the plane, and they wanted China to see, so that China knew, we're your daddy. We know, like, we knew what you're going to do. And we're blowing up your whole spot, your whole plan. And then supposedly the whole point was those people are tied to the technology, or at least one of them is. And the Freescale Semiconductors, we found an NSA security report, National Security Agency report from 2005, that is about commercial emergence of room temperature superconductor microchips. And these superconductor microchips, what have we been talking about? Superconductivity.
Yeah.
And it talks about Freescale Semiconductors in it 9 times. And the report names them 9 times. It talks about their microchips, their advancement. They had just put out a microchip that was smaller than a dimple in a golf ball, like days before the plane went missing.
Wait,
wow.
so
I'm just going,
these are
okay,
the guys
who
who were on the plane who were working on this, or?
I mean, the thing is, we can't figure out exactly what they were doing. And I think that they even through disinformation, there's this conspiracy theory out there that 4 people were tied to some patent, and that the 5th one is like somehow the Carlyle Rothschilds. Well, we looked into it. Those 4 people aren't even on the plane. But if you're trying to cover something up, you put this fake conspiracy theory out there that you get the conspiracy theorists to buy into. But the real conspiracy theory is that these dudes were literally tied to the technology we're seeing in these videos. And that's where you go, you know, if you control this technology.
Dude, that's what they always do, man. They try and divert you away from the truth.
There was even a 4chan post about that. So we found everything there is out there. We found
this
4chan post mentions that. Yeah, we looked at it from every angle. And, you know, I don't believe everything's out there, but this one 4chan post literally talks about them putting out fake conspiracies around it to cover it up, the fact that it went to Diego Garcia, that they peeled the paint off the plane and took it apart in Diego Garcia and stuff. Like, it's just a lot of stuff, a lot of evidence. And this isn't even all of it, but, you know, you can already tell that there's something weird going on here related to all of this, right?
Oh, for sure. There's
so,
no
doubt. Yeah, so it's wild.
Pretty wild.
The letter to me is the thing that creeps me out the most, by far.
Yeah, I got to go check that out. I was going to ask you about
I've listened to it 40 times, and the first few times I listened to it, like, the hair raises on my arm. At one point, it goes, "Hi, Ashton, impressive," and I'm like, "Okay, that's are you in my closet?" Like, where? It's weird,
now they're just toying you with you at the same time, so they are impressed, but at the same time,
they knew so much stuff and they knew about this guy Malcolm Bendall and Randall Carlson that I had never heard of, but they had apparently gone on Joe Rogan, and Malcolm Bendall's working with plasmoids. Which, what have we been talking about? These plasma fields, like, and this guy is literally creating an engine that produces no exhaust, and it uses plasmoid technology where it has basically 2 different circulating, like, gas and water that is able to create this reaction where you have, like, basically cold fusion occurring. And I'm sitting here going, whoa, like this. And it even argues, the letter says, like, this is a more rudimentary form of what, like, this other island, Diego Garcia presumably, has going on, you know? And I'm just in there thinking, like, these are the orbs, right? This is the orbs. And so we dig into all that. And apparently he went on Rogan. And it turns out the weirdest part, I started having, like, I'm only 1 degree of freedom away from this guy. Like, all of a sudden, George from the Cosmic Summit starts reaching out to me. He's like, dude, I know Randall Carlson, the gray bearded man, the letter's talking about. And George had been in my replies already before that.
Yeah.
It leads me to Malcolm Bendall, who had apparently gone on Rogan and they had some argument, and Rogan decided that he was like a scam artist or something, so they never aired the episode. And I dug into him, and he's not a scam artist. Like, the engine seems to actually work. I've heard pretty much firsthand about some results out there or whatever. Like, this thing's going to change the world potentially. And he's going to be at the Cosmic Summit. Yeah, and so the last thing I was going to say on is that, so while this video comes out, this is what, a little over a month and a week ago, I reached out to Bob Greenier, who's the guy I was talking about with, I was on the podcast, I had him on my podcast, he was doing the low energy nuclear reactions. He's hanging out with Malcolm Bendall in, like, the Maldives or something, like, that day. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, you don't just know the guy, you're hanging out with him right now? He's like, yeah, I'm hanging out with him. And Bob Greenier thought it was like some kind of hoax. And I'm going, dude, who's hoaxing this video? Like, it's talking about my case, like, in more depth than I am. And I've gone on 70 podcasts. Like, is this some kind of super stalker? Because they're coming up with all these elements too, like the exact time the plane lands at some military base is 1856. They're saying the time the plane was disappeared is 1843, which is 3 minutes later than I'd been saying it. there's so many unique elements to the story that I hadn't been promoting where I'm like, this is really bizarre. Yeah. But then they also start talking about Malcolm Bendall and all this information about the technology supposedly being tied to that. And I'm like, okay, so this person's a super stalker of me, a super stalker of Malcolm Bendall, and they've got enough time on their hands to come up with an 11-minute long original story. And at the end, it's the creepiest part because it goes, this is what I want to leave you with. It's like, how do you stop somebody that has unlimited power, that has full control over the media, that can craft a narrative of events that fits their purpose and has the whole world eating out of the palm of their hand? And I listen to that part, I'm like, okay, I'm freaked out. And then it goes, after like a lifetime in their service, I think I've learned how. You talk about them and you don't stop talking. And I just go, okay, that's enough internet for me for today, right? Like, wow, like that's, like, dude.
So
that's
wild, man.
Since you brought up his name, I have to ask. I've been seeing this thing on Twitter going around about Joe Rogan saying Joe Rogan convinced Ashton to never speak about this. What is that all about? What is that?
So Joe Rogan reached out to me. It was, I think, because I was just showing the DMs because this had this whole drama of all this bullshit and people lying about thinking I made it up, and people like there's so many, especially like the skeptics and debunkers. Like these videos have broken people's minds. Like I think I've gotten to the point. I announced my retirement from the case starting on the 10th anniversary next month because it's just gotten to the point where it's so toxic, and we've kind of run the course of what we can find out about the plane. We've got a couple more pieces, but that's going to be about it. But like right around the same time, all of a sudden one morning, I wake up and look at my DMs, and there's Joe Rogan in my DMs, and I'm going, "Whoa!" At first, I think it's a fake Joe Rogan,
right? Yeah, immediately you would think.
But I see 2 million followers. Click on his name, and I'm like, "Holy shit!" Okay. And it's basically, I mean, you can see the DMs I've leaked, not all of them, but like just enough to prove that it was really him. And he's like, "Hey, I want to talk to you about the Malaysian flight. You know, like when can we talk?" And I'm like, "Holy shit, this is happening." Right. So I replied back like, "Dude, here's my number. Hit me up anytime you want, buddy. Like, Joe, thank you." Like, you know, so, you know, we actually set it up, and I even have the emails from his booking agent where I gave him my info or whatever, and we had a date already planned and everything. And then the next day he comes back, he's like, "I'm gonna have to put a pause on this. Like, I think this might be a hoax." And he links to me the subreddit that's out there. I call it the debunker subreddit because it's just filled with people who are like, who are adamant the videos are fake, and they claim they found this cloud picture, and that somehow proves that it's all fake. And then he also links to me the Danny Jones podcast I went on, where Danny Jones like falsely puts this label on it, claiming that the VFX corridor crew debunked it. And I'm going, he doesn't know the backstory because Danny Jones, like after that interview, like first of all, I didn't get debunked on that interview at all. Yeah. And I refuted everything those guys said at the end. And I even wrote it down in real time because I was afraid they were going to edit it in a way that was going to be deceptive. And then Danny Jones,
hold up. Sorry. Did they bring you on with you knowing that they were going to try and debunk you?
Yes, and they didn't tell me either.
Yeah, they tried to lure you, set you up.
And Julian Dory is Danny Jones' best friend, and they both did. And Julian Dory ended up deleting his whole interview with me because it made him look so terrible because he's just like Jersey Shore trash. I mean, the guy's an awful person. He ended up deleting it because he was getting so many negative comments because of the way that he acted. Like you don't bring somebody on and then like try to debunk them. These are guys who talk to people who think they have psychic powers and see demons and aliens. Yeah. And
right.
They're coming at me trying to debunk my stories. it doesn't add up, right? And then they have this corridor crew guy where Julian's sitting here telling me that like we have a major studio who's going to recreate the videos. This is literally what he tells me in person. And then I get on Danny Jones. I can see Danny Jones smirking at me right throughout the interview. You probably don't see it on the thing, but I see him smirking. I'm like, there's something going on here, right? And we get to the end. He's got this pre-recorded video, and I'm thinking, oh, these corridor crew people I'd never heard of are going to have remade the videos, but it's not. It's just this idiot Nico sitting there smiling like condescendingly and cockingly, talking about literally just reading the Metabunk forum and pretending they're like his ideas and opinions when they're not. And every single thing he says is wrong, like objectively false. Like says it's contrails, it's not. Says it's daytime, it's nighttime. And I'm just sitting here going, oh, that's it. I was actually scared he was going to remake the video. And I told Danny afterwards, you can literally ask him, and he'll unless he lies, he'll say, I told him, like, I thought you were going to have somebody actually recreate the videos, not just come up with some crap that I've already heard all the arguments for, right? And so I'm literally writing them down, and he's sitting there going, Ashton, pay attention. I'm like, I don't need to pay attention. I've literally already heard all this bullshit. Yeah. And so I'm writing all the stuff down so I don't miss any of it in case I have to, like, in case they edited it or whatever. But then Danny calls me like, I think at least 3 times, maybe even more. And we text a bunch where he's talking about what should I call it? I want to call it something that'll get a lot of attention. And it's really weird the way he does this. I've never had anybody do this ever. I'm just thinking, just call it like MH370 conspiracy and advanced technology. He's like, no, I can't call it conspiracy or the YouTube things will get me or whatever. And he's like, I want to call it exposed, like how you got exposed. And I'm like,
what?
Wow.
I'm like, dude. And I'm like, well,
it's so dirty.
It's really dirty. It was.
Dude, that's a way to not get anyone to come back on your podcast.
And if you look at the rest of his titles, he's never done this before, like ever before or since.
Why is everybody hating on you so hard, man? What the hell?
It was wild. It was weird, man. And I think it's just because of the interaction with Julian, because we had a huge falling out afterwards. Because I told him like he had made up a bunch of false stuff in our interview. I'm like, dude, I'm gonna have to come out and make a post about the false statements you made. Especially he was trying to discredit certain witnesses and Florence Changi and all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, you're just making up a bunch of crap and Googling stuff thinking you're getting the answers. But it was weird because then even the morning of, he calls me up and he's like acting really cordial to me, but it's weird, the conversation, right? And I'm like, well, let's just call it then, you know, the person gets revealed and not exposed. Because I kept telling him, like, look at the reaction that Julian got. He got a huge negative reaction. Like, people are going to jump down your neck if you give this a false name, right? And so he ends up calling it exposed anyway. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm not promoting this. I'm cutting ties with this guy.
Yeah.
And I actually watched their video because I wanted to see how I came across. And at that time, there was this huge hype that I was going to be, everything was going to get debunked. Julian made this big video post about it. All the UFO community was ready for me to get debunked. And they're going through the video, and I'm sitting there going like, well, I was there. I didn't get dunked on. Like, I would have known for sure.
What happened.
Yeah. I'm like, you guys are going to be disappointed. And everyone's going, you're about to get debunked. You can't wait. And I'm like, okay, well, I was there. So you can watch in real time as the people in the chat start to realize it's never going to happen. And it's almost like they're watching their home football team. Like, they know when you're down by like 40 points, and you're like, okay,
it's not
going to happen, right? We're not going to get the comeback. And at the end, Danny just starts melting down. People start like getting mad in the chat, and he starts banning people left and right. And I'm just sitting there going, wow. I was like, this is crazy. But it goes to show the power of a fake headline, because Joe Rogan had linked that, and I don't think he'd ever watched it. But he saw the headline and thought, oh, well, this guy must have got debunked in here, right?
Well, he's got others pulling his strings too.
For
you
sure.
know,
so
I'm just saying.
You're talking about naming podcasts and debunking stuff. So is it fair to say that I could potentially name this episode "Joe Rogan did not convince Ashton Forbes to stop talking about"?
Yeah. So I pushed back and I said I kind of told Joe Rogan the abbreviated version of what I just told you guys regarding both scenarios, right? And said, hey man, like I'm just a normal guy. I'm not trying to mislead anybody. I think I even linked him at the end the whistleblower story to me, because I wanted to be like, look at this crazy shit that happened. Somebody sent me this crazy letter, right? And at the end too, I said like, hey, you know, if you don't want to talk to me, at least talk to these other scientists and engineers that are out there. The one specifically that I think is legit is Hal Puthoff. I think some people would say, oh, well, he believes in remote viewing or something, so that they try to discredit him. But this guy's a legit engineer.
I believe in remote viewing. Go ahead and discredit me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff we don't understand.
But here's the rub on it. So I saw that.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, just because someone believes one thing, don't discredit everything they say.
Agree. And so the thing is too, and even before that, I was thinking like this would be a good time to retire from the case after the Joe Rogan. And the way I was going to present it is like, here are the debunks, here's the evidence, let the world decide, right?
Yeah.
But I honestly think it might be for the best, because also the negative attention, like you guys saw about this Joe Rogan stuff, and people were saying I was lying about it and all this stuff, and I ended up having to reveal DMs, which I hate. Probably means I'll never be able to go on Joe Rogan. But I think it might be for the best, because what I've taken away from this whole thing is that a lot of people are not just not ready for this conversation or ready for the technology, but that if this stuff comes out, it's actually going to break a lot of people's brains.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and this goes to the larger conspiracy of what the government's hiding, where a lot of people, and I've had people, the amount of politics that are at play in the UFO sphere, people just believe whatever the government says. And if they find out the government's been lying about all this stuff for so long, I actually worry about what people will do. Like maybe harm themselves, have total meltdowns.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would be bad.
A lot of stuff that if they found out the truth about a lot of stuff that would happen. And this is definitely
so that's the part where
Oh, dude!
And if you see the reaction though, that like a couple of these spaces I did the last couple of nights, I have people yelling at me, having total meltdowns, claiming I'm a liar about this stuff, and I keep telling them like, stop betting against me, man. Like I'm not lying, and I have all the receipts, right? And they keep doubling down. And then we just keep bringing the hammer down of truth on them.
Well, that's all they do, man. They just say you're a liar, you're a liar, you're a liar, and they don't have anything to back it up whatsoever. And
who's
think
paying?
They claim that's like, why didn't he show?
Who's paying?
Yeah. Well, they're like, no, why? They go like, why didn't he show the DMs if it's true or whatever? And I'm like, okay. And then I let them give them enough rope to hang themselves. And then I show the DMs. And then they go, okay, well, now you're being rude to veterans. And so I'm like, what?
No like, matter what you do, you can't
like,
win with
leave me
people.
alone, right? Just leave me alone. But the problem is if I went on Joe Rogan, he's got, I don't know how many viewers he gets. I'm guessing like 10 million more, right? For every episode. Like you can imagine there would be a dividing line where there's people who are I'm going to become a pariah, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be some people that believe that get awoken, but there's going to be a lot of people who just hate me, right? Like probably for the rest of their lives. Well, and I get a little bit worried because those people that yelled at me too.
You're doing it awesome.
Worried about.
At least
the more you get mad at you, the better.
At least on this podcast, you'll only have 250 people hating you and 250 people agreeing with you. So you're good, man. You're good. No, so we're almost we're at an hour and 45 minutes almost. Like I'm blown away, man. I'm gonna dig into it more on my own, but I knew it was bullcrap from the beginning, and now hearing what you had to say, there's no way those videos are fake unless there's some computer genius that the world has never seen that can create something in 4 days. Create something in 4 days that no one else can create in months and months and months, or what you're saying is true, and that's videos of shit we've never seen before, and it's real. And that's where
we found the leaker too. So that's one thing I wanted to say is that, so we also even found the leaker, right? Remember when I was talking about all the evidence around watch the videos, watch how they cropped stuff, they removed the HUD data. I'm sitting here going, this had to be a U.S. military personnel, probably not a spy, right? They wouldn't post it on the internet they're a spy. They just wanted the world to know the truth of what happened. They might not even have known those orbs are our orbs. They might have thought those are UFOs, right? And therefore they're not hurting national security. But later on, you find out, no, those were Lockheed Martin's orbs or Northrop Grumman's orbs or whatever, right? And then they realized the magnitude of what they just revealed, which is super advanced tech. That is our trump card that we've been hiding from China and Russia, right? So it took me weeks because I'm sitting there. I'm like, I got a psychological profile for this person. I find out early on, unless there's national or what's it called, martial law, that anyone who is charged has to be public. Like they can't hide the charge. So I'm like, oh, I can find them. So I'm looking around big name people first, like the Edward Snowdens, Chelsea Mannings, all these people, but none of the time frames or anything match up. I'm not finding anything. I almost gave up. And then I start doing really specific date range searches because I'm thinking it's got to be within like a couple years that they would have caught him and charged him. And then I find Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn. And he checks every box right away. I'm going, holy shit, signals intelligence, flying on spy planes, assigned to the spy plane squadron in February of 2014. The investigation into him begins April 2nd, 2014, the next month after the plane goes missing. There's even an article out there where it's talking about his case. And at the top is a picture of a P-8 Poseidon spy plane. And it's saying the P-8 Poseidon was searching for Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. I'm going, wait, what?
Wow.
And so he potentially was there that night watching it play out. He was in a high enough role where he would have access to both recordings. And the defense argued in the trial that the classified information in question was available on the internet. I'm going, what? Like,
there it is.
They tried to get him for life in prison, and then they ended up having to admit they put all this bullshit like prostitution charge. You're trying to get a guy for life in prison, you throw a prostitution charge on there, like. And then it turns out they had to admit there was no evidence he was sharing any information with anyone from China. There was no spying going on, and they somehow convinced him to take a plea deal where they probably told him, dude, look at the damage you did. He was actually a patriot. Like, if you look up his history, we had trusted him with nuke codes. He was like a congressional aide. He was like fast tracked towards like upper management kind of guy. We look at his Facebook, and he's friends with General Flynn on Facebook. I'm like, wait, this dude was connected. And I'm sitting there going like, this is the guy, right? Yeah. And takes a plea deal. And even with a plea deal where he only admits to 2 charges of dissemination of classified information, 2 potential videos, he gets 9 years. 9 years for 2. There was a dude just recently that was, I think, pleaded guilty to actually paying selling secrets to China, and he only got 2 years for literally being caught with espionage. And even in Edward C. Lynn's, we found his appeal. In his appeal, he argues that compared to other people with the same charges, he got way more time. They had people testifying as to how much damage he did.
They wanted to make an example out of him.
Yeah, they wouldn't talk about like exactly what the circumstances were around the evidence. The evidence they used against him to keep him locked up and in pretrial detainment was mundane because they can't show the real stuff, right? And you just look at the whole case, and I just go, this is 99.9% sure. This has got to be the guy. Yeah. I've been saying his name on every podcast.
Or someone directly underneath him.
Or somebody like right near him, right? Like there's just no other way. Yeah. Oh, and he gets caught with flight manifests from an operation that included search and rescue code names. If there's not enough in May,
I know.
So come on, guys.
Manifests, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there it
is. What's crazy, like, because the dude is like, if he's the guy, like, he's a patriot, man. If you're the person who's trying to get this information out there, there was no way we were going to ever solve this without these videos. Yeah. And to me, that's my hero. Not the David Grushes or the other people that are out there. I think those people are great, but the heroes are the unsung ones, the ones that sacrifice, that break their NDAs to show us something that's completely incredible, right?
Do you think you would do that if you were in that position?
Probably not, is the reality of it.
It's
right?
a tough
That's the thing
about
why
truthful answer.
It's a sacrifice, right? The heroes are sacrificed. Heroes, ones that make that sacrifice. So, and the thing is, we ignored him. We ignored these videos for almost 10 years now, right? And he got out of prison probably like a year and a half ago. And if you think about the mental state he must be in, where we ignored these videos that long, right? There's no way he ever wants to talk about this. And his plea deal probably makes it so he can never talk about them ever again.
Have you tried to talk to him at all? Have you reached out in any way?
Yeah, we found him easily. It's really easy to find people on the internet, turns out.
Yeah.
Found a phone number that most likely was connected to him based on looking at where he had lived in the past. And I called it, and it rang. And somebody picked up and hung up right away. They didn't let it go to voicemail. They just picked up and hung up right away. And I went, oh shit, that's him. Right. And I texted him and said,
tracing that call.
If you're the guy, you're my hero, man. I just want to let you know, if you do come out, I'll use my whole following, all the money I have, whatever, to protect you. I mean, I'm sure that doesn't mean anything. I just wanted him to know that, maybe that would make him feel better. Because
was this before or after you received that letter?
Oh, way before. This was back in October. The letter was just in January. And the letter was after I was already like starting to transition away, where the case was dying down. I made this post about Miami aliens, that weird shit that happened
the Nephilim in the world.
And I got the most views on any post ever. I made a post about that going, this is weird, because I saw this like firsthand witness account that was like really creepy. And I make a post about it. I get 10 million views.
Yeah.
And even the letter, you guys should listen to that letter tonight, because in the letter goes like, this would be better use of your time than posting about mall aliens. Like, they were just admonishing me for like even talking about it. And I'm like, okay, guy, I get the messages received. You don't want me talking about mall aliens anymore. You want me focusing on the science. I got you.
It's crazy.
So it's crazy, man. The amount of evidence, and the thing is, like, just the body of evidence, and like we played it all out on this podcast. And there's even more, really. I didn't go into all the nitty gritty, but you just look at that whole body of evidence. How could we come up with all of this if these videos are fake, right? Like, so much of it's not all dependent on the videos, but it like sprawls from the videos, right?
Yeah.
And that's the part where it's like, I think that in some cases, it takes somebody either going through all this or even being in my perspective and seeing it all play out, where I know I didn't hoax the videos and I didn't hoax this weird letter and listen to this all play out, where I'm going, there's something just really abnormal going on here.
You're a real logical dude too. Your whole background, you know what I mean? Like your background of being the skeptic originally and all that, like the way you laid it out is exactly how I would as well, you know, looking at it from a skeptic point of view and just keep coming to these logical explanations and saying, hey man, I can't dispute this.
Yeah.
You know, and you've done the work.
So two things to add to that. One of them, when we end this, we always say death faded out and we play music. If you can, if it's not too long after we stop recording, I'd like to talk to you about something. I just want to shoot the shit with you about that. But something else that I heard you talk about today that we haven't brought up yet that hit me is the 19 family members that were able to call the cell phones of this is what I heard. One of the things that you said on the podcast I listened to that stuck with me, that they were able to call the phones, 4 days after? Now, I know
up to 4 days.
I know if my phone's turned off or it's dead or anything, it goes directly to voicemail when you call it. Directly. No ring, no nothing. And these people were able to call and get a ring. And didn't one of them do it on live TV?
Proved it on TV. We have the video of it.
What's the
it's pretty wild
for that?
Because normally I talk about that when I talk about the lack of debris and the radar and the pings and all that stuff, right? And no black boxes, by the way, either. Somehow we didn't find those either. But the 19 family members signed a joint statement to, I believe it was the Malaysian government, asking them to look into the fact that the phones were still ringing. If it was 1 or 2, I'd probably dismiss it. But 19 people going, hey, the phones are still ringing. And then CNN gets these phony experts going, well, that can happen because the gas from Venus and you're like, wait, dude, what? Exactly. You're like, there's no signal out in the Indian Ocean, brother. There's if phone goes underwater in the salt water, it's dead within like 15 minutes. If it's underneath a foot of water, you don't even get a signal anymore. So none of that makes any damn sense, right?
I dropped my phone in the toilet one time and immediately shut off and died. And if you called it would go straight to voicemail. So don't tell me a burning plane plummeted into the ocean and the phone still worked. Like, come on. It's just ridiculous.
It's bizarre. And that's why it's just like, if there are logical people out there, you got to just look at this and go, the evidence does not line up to a plane crashing in the ocean. It's just that simple. If you don't believe the videos are real, you can't believe the science is fine.
We've seen other planes.
They hit that water into a million pieces.
And there's a giant debris field. Where was that?
Everywhere.
Did they find any parts from it that legitimately, in your mind, proved that they even faked finding a part? That with the serial number, anything?
The official search found nothing. They searched for 3 years, and the official search finds not one piece of debris, even though they searched with 40 planes and 40 boats. They've got how many countries have satellite systems? The debris field should have been so big that we're seeing it from satellites from space, right? We even had people who are like amateurs looking through commercial satellites, which aren't as good as the military ones, and they're pretending like they see stuff, and people are imagining M's in the water, which aren't really there and stuff like that. But the military and the government would have seen it for sure. And so a couple pieces a year and a half later wash up 3,000 miles away in the Reunion Islands, 3,000 miles away in Africa, even though the plane supposedly crashed off the shore of Australia. No debris washes up in Australia whatsoever. And only 3 pieces have been confirmed tied to the plane. What they don't tell you is there's this flapper on that's 8 feet long. And this seems long, but the plane's wings are 100 feet long on either side. This is a very tiny piece of the plane. And they don't tell you. They say, they matched it with some serial numbers. Well, they don't tell you they only matched it with a part number. They didn't match it to a unique serial number.
That's
nice.
Unique serial plate. There's supposed to be a bolted-on unique serial plate on this flapper. It's magically missing.
Wow.
You're like, wait, what? You can Google it and you can confirm this, that I'm not lying about this. Wow. And so the media, of course, doesn't mention that. They just mention, they found some serial numbers and therefore it's automatically the plane. So in my opinion, if it's a fire scenario, there's no inconsistency. Like we're talking about the plane going to Diego Garcia. You break the plane apart, you throw a couple pieces in the ocean, and it turns out the debris, the drift pattern goes right past Diego Garcia as well. Wow. So it's a lot easier to get from Diego Garcia to Africa than it is from Australia to Africa. They also do this drift analysis. They throw a couple pieces of boards in the water, and they immediately figure out there's no chance it could get to the Reunion Islands. And then they just go, well, forget that. Ignore that, everybody. We're going to have the Americans give us an actual flapper on, And then now all of a sudden the model now shows that it's going to get there. They don't actually watch it get there. The model says it's going to get there. And then you even have Jeff Wise going, well, if the model's correct based on what they did, the barnacle growth would not be consistent with what it actually showed up as well. And I'm just going, well, it's 3,000 miles away and there was no debris field found. So I'm not going to believe some random model that says, oh, well, yeah, you just believe us, trust us. This proves this is where it came from. Because reality is, if it crashed along the 7th arc, we would have found it. We searched above and below water everywhere. We had looking for the black boxes. The black boxes ping up to 20,000 feet deep. There's it's not too deep or anything like that. Like they should have found anything.
So
yeah.
Two things. One, if it was a fire, I'm not doubting there was a fire. I'm saying if that's all it was, I feel like that would have come out. Like, it's a fire, Boeing would have to eat it, it would be a big thing, but they wouldn't do all of this to cover that. And second, we never talked about who may have been on the plane, really, that they were trying to maybe kill and then trying to save after.
Well, so I think that we talked about the Freescale semiconductor scientists. I think that's definitely the motive. Oh, 100%. Yeah. Okay. I mean, we looked at, there might be other people, but it's hard to tie together. The Freescale semiconductor scientists, the NSA security report, the technology, to me, that's a done deal. That's the motive, in my opinion. If you're in a court room, that's what you're going with your motive for sure.
And semiconductors are a huge thing because, like, supposedly
go look at how much semiconductor industries.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, dude, that's why I really wanted to get into it, and we could probably go on forever, but I just kind of wanted to talk, or for our listeners, what is like the importance of these room temperature semiconductors, and what technological advancements would come from this?
So let's first start with the other question about the fire, right? Because if it's a fire, why were we covering this up? And then you go look at the videos, right? And then you go, that's why we're covering it up, right? That's the answer. Like, it all wraps up in a nice bow. It's not, you wouldn't cover up a fire scenario for anything else other than these crazy videos that are showing secret technology that we can't let leak out, right? We have to do every cover up possible for that, because it's national security. And even I had Corbell on a news station saying, this technology is classified higher than top secret, higher than nukes are, because this is a weapon. You can turn this into a weapon. You can turn this into a weapon that can destroy the planet, not just nuke the planet, but like destroy the whole planet. That's how it's huge this is. Whoa. Now, with respect to the people in the technology, and I have another link where Corbell is also talking to Rogan. I posted this morning, where he's talking about what is he saying? Supercapacitors. He's going, oh, and I had this guy in the 70s who was talking about supercapacitors. I'm going, does he mean superconductors? And then the next second later, he's going, oh, no, it's actually superconductors. And I'm going, oh, shit. I'm like, he doesn't realize how big this. And this is where I realized that even these UFOologists have no idea the implications of the technology or what required to start them. Room temperature superconductivity will change everything on this planet. Imagine that your phone doesn't heat up anymore. Imagine that you can overclock your computer 1,000 times because it doesn't heat up when you overclock it. Imagine being able to transfer power from anywhere on the earth to anywhere else with no degradation due to heat whatsoever. I think 30% or more of all power is lost in heat transfer in power lines. Just think about just those implications. We haven't even talked about hoverboards, mag trains, hover cars, and then the magnetic fields that they can manipulate. Like, this is the part where you start to talk about the stuff that seems like straight up magic. There might be medical healing capabilities. There would be force fields and cloaking become possible. Fusion power becomes possible. Portable fusion power, the sun in the palm of your hand. Not just that, open, or like literally free energy. You take your system, you don't need to defy the laws of thermodynamics. A closed system can't get more energy out than it puts in. You open your system up to the vacuum of space-time and the energy of space-time itself, and now you're borrowing energy from space-time, and this is how you can get more energy out than you're putting in terms of a local perspective. And then you have stuff like teleportation as well as doomsday weapons. You turn the weapon side, you turn this thing sideways, or it's a metaphor, but you change the implications of it, and now you can even maybe make a black hole. You might be able to create a big bang at the large enough scales. So this is where you have to really think of the implications, because it all starts to come together. This is why you cover it up. This is why UFOology is hiding this stuff, and why the government's hiding it. It is classified higher than the highest levels possible, right? This is whoever controls this technology controls the whole world.
Yeah.
Right. And this also may explain why the espionage scenario. If these people have figured it out, of course you're going to sacrifice. Yeah, you're going to sacrifice a plane so that China gets set back even 10 years from this, right?
So where was the flight originating and landing supposedly before?
Yeah, Kuala Lumpur, and then it's headed to Beijing, and then it goes dark at the weak point between all the radars in the South China Sea. Yep.
So
head straight to China.
Hypothetically, people could have been going to China to give them technology, and we intercepted it and stopped it. Hypothetically, I'm just saying.
That's what letter to me literally says happened, and that's that's actually more and more where I lean from. That's
there you go. I feel smart right now. I feel smart because I haven't heard that yet, so I feel good about that.
When you listen to a letter, you're going to be like, "Holy shit, I want to talk to Ashton again."
Yeah,
I already
do want to talk to you again. Man.
Am I going to be able to sleep after I listen to it? That's what I'm.
Probably when you get to the last paragraph, that's when you start to go, okay, yeah, I've never.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave the lights on.
Yeah. No, I'm listening to it tonight. I'm intrigued. I want to hear this.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. I'm sure I can just Google it and find it. Right? You said,
dude, this has been phenomenal. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
Thank you, man, for coming on.
Yeah, the last thing about the letter too is like early on when it was going on, I thought, okay, this is some kind of somebody's trying to like piggyback off my work and get attention. And then I pulled something. What I did was I played the letter multiple times on my stream to see if they would copyright strike me, because I have that happen if I play like any music or anybody else's videos. They'd never copyright strike me, and I'm like, well, that's weird. And then people are going, oh, well, they were just trying to boost their channel, and then the channel just goes dark. Like literally, in the last month, hasn't posted anything. Like they buffered it with some like kind of more bullshit videos, and then in the middle is like the letter to Ashton, and it's weird. Like if somebody is trying to send a message, that's the way you do it. So I can't decide if it's like it's either a super fan of me and Malcolm Bendall, or it's some kind of weird psyop between either our government or a foreign government, or it's a real thing, or maybe somewhere in between. I don't really know, but I will say it's a super compelling story.
Yeah. No. I'm going with real things.
So this was cool. I'm glad you guys appreciated this, man.
Oh, more.
Yeah, dude.
Yes, man. Thanks for coming on.
And this is where
blown away.
Don't leave, but this is where we say death faded out. And then he'll play some music here, and it'll be fun. And thank you so much for joining us. I'm blown away by everything you said, and I'm gonna watch that letter to you, and it's gonna be awesome, man. I'm ready for it.
Oh, and once again, where can anybody find that letter and find you specifically as well?
If you want to find that weird letter, it's called Diego Garcia Whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes on YouTube. If you Google that, I believe you'll find it because enough people have watched it, pull it up to the top. And if you want to find me either on YouTube or Twitter, you can do @JustXAshton. You can find me on both those locations. I've been streaming pretty much every night, as well as doing several posts every day. So if you want to learn about science or crazy stuff going on or the case, you can follow there.
Very nice.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So,
gentlemen,
thanks
been
for